Yeah, hi, Jeff. Thank you for joining us on the SaaS Minds podcast. We're talking about Grain today, which is an amazing tool that we would like to recommend for everyone as well. And well, without further ado, and before getting into some of the more difficult questions, Jeff, if you want to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit more about Grain. What does Grain do, and basically, what is the product that we'll be talking about today?
Yeah, it's really excited to be here. A little bit about myself. My name is Jeff. I'm the CEO of Grain. I have been doing startups for a while. Went through Y Combinator, Techstars. Before that, I was doing product management for a few years, and started my career in management consulting. Grain, like you mentioned, it's a product that is a AI note taker and conversational intelligence tool. We work with startups to scale up SMB to mid market, and we help sales teams record their calls, automate their sales follow ups, coach their team and reps, and also manage and understand your pipeline and revenue health. We also have other teams like product managers and customer success use it for recording their customer calls.
Okay, so given your background, is this basically a pain point that you resolved for yourself in a way?
Yeah, I mean, this space it's changed so dramatically, with the advent of open, chat GPT and all the large language models. Initially, the problem we had was just we were an early remote team, and we were doing a lot of business on, over Zoom. This was kind of pre-COVID. Grain started pre-COVID, and just found it difficult. We
Mhm.
realized there's these really high value conversations happening, and not really great ways to utilize this data that was happening. And so the initial idea was to kind of make it really easy to make those recordings accessible, and useful. And now, the vision's kind of grown a lot more over time.
Got it. So you mentioned the team was is kind of remote. So how many developers are we talking about, or I guess just what's the size of the grain today?
Yeah, all in, the Grain team is around 20 people, and a little over half that are developers or on the engineering team.
Okay. Um, okay. So let's dive into the competitors a little bit. So you mentioned that ChatGPT kind of changed the game. If I'm not kind of misspoken there. Other than dropping without dropping any names, it's a quite competitive space. So how do you position Grain compared to the competitors? Basically, what do you think Grain is doing better than some of the alternatives, and why would you recommend Grain instead of any of those?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the interesting things in general in SaaS, for this is a SaaS podcast, is how do you define your competitive landscape? Um, and I think it's really helpful to think about kind of direct
Hmm.
competitors. And the way I think about direct competitors is the people that, you're going head to head with in the same customer segments, trying to solve the same problems. And then you have indirect competitors, which are people that aren't maybe head to head, but maybe they're a similar, solving a similar problem with a similar solution in an adjacent market. Um, and so for us, the space has a
Hmm.
lot. We have a lot of indirect competitors. There's a lot of people who are kind of becoming call recorders. But for the specific, one of the things we you can often do in SaaS to help with like crowded markets is by narrowing down, especially as a startup. The bigger you're competing, the more competitors you have. But as you kind of focus and narrow in on a more target segment, that can be vertical, it can be industry, it can be size, it can be location. There's a lot of ways to narrow. You can compete with less. So that's one of the things that we've kind of done in our competitive space, is really try to focus on helping SaaS and productized agency sales teams, specifically at kind of the lower end, not at enterprise, but at like kind of the lower end of the market as far as company size. And still, there are still players and competitors in that space, but it's definitely kind of through the focus, narrowed down who we're competitive to. And as we build more and more feature for that segment, it differentiates us more and more from kind of your generic call recorders.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is basically you kind of found your niche, right? And you're going from there. correct?
Well, it's always I don't know if we yeah we're that's what we're doing. I wouldn't say we found it because that makes it final. We're always evolving, but yeah, that's kind of what we've been working on.
Yeah, yeah, of course, there's always room for growth, right? Okay, so we have a free plan on Green, right?
Yes, yeah,
And
yep.
then
People can
there's
try it for
starter
free.
business and enterprise. Can you tell me a little bit more about your pricing model? Okay.
Yeah, of
Can you
course.
tell me a bit more about
So
the pricing model? Basically, what are the kind of benefits of?
yep. So with Grain, we have a. It's essentially like a trial plus a little bit of freemium. So anyone can come in and try the product for free, and then to essentially that gives you a limited number of recordings to try the product and try to see if the value drives for you. Once you then decide to upgrade, we have a kind of a basic, we call it the starter plan, which is primarily for just your general recording use cases. So a lot of our product managers, CS people buy this plan. And then we have our business plan, which is primarily for sales teams. And this is where you have a lot of the more sales specific features like deal management, coaching, integrations with CRMs, trackers, things along those lines. And we allow on any paid plan, we allow free seats also because there are people who want to be part of the workspace but aren't really recording. They're just there to watch and view recordings.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. So in terms of growth and well, how it relates to Grain, other than like the revenue and generic metrics that we all follow and love, are there any North Star metrics? Anything that Grain is aiming to achieve in the long run?
Yeah, I mean, as a SaaS business, our number one metric is ARR, MRR. So we look very, very closely at that, and that's what we're always trying to drive forward. There's then, sort of second line metrics that matter a lot to us. We look a lot at retention, all three versions of it, sort of overall logo retention, NRR, and then gross retention. We also look at a lot of product engagement metrics, engagement
Hmm.
retention, DAUs. Actually, WAUs is weekly active users is our kind of main thing we're looking at. And then we're also obviously looking at our sign up funnels, our conversion rates. That's
Hmm.
kind of the main sort of set of metrics we're looking at.
Got it. Got it. So, if you don't mind sharing, like, what is the current growth trajectory? Like, what is the size of the customer base right now? How many, I would say, happy clients you currently serve?
Yeah. So as far as customer base goes, we have in the thousands of accounts and growing pretty well. You know, several in month over month growth consistently,
Yes.
and so yeah, we're pretty happy with the growth we're seeing. Definitely, always could be more though. Growth is always something that we're like shouldn't get sated with.
Of of course. Of course. So, how did you approach growth change as you grew in size? Basically, what are the challenges that you're seeing as Grain is still, well, as you said, growing and hopefully growing even more?
Yeah, so I think challenges with growth for us are we're really the big challenge I'd say is just trying to go from what we say is good growth to great growth, and doing that by kind of building on our existing channels and a channel
Hmm.
specifically that we can scale. And what I mean scale is like that we know how to invest more into it, and more investment leads to more growth. We have word of mouth and casual contact as a very strong growth channel for us. It's where a majority of our users are coming from. Casual contact is we define as like when people see other people using Grain. So
Okay.
by people using the product, they expose other potential users to the product.
Hmm.
Those channels like word of mouth and casual contact just are
Hmm.
sort of, I would say, they compound and grow as the product grows, but they're not like a gas pedal that you like can spend money, push time, and get it to grow. And so that's been the challenge for us is like finding the right repeatable motion to sort of augment our really high performing and effective kind of word of mouth casual contact loops.
Got it. Got it. So, that's really interesting. In terms of casual content, I'm assuming you can't measure that, right? Or is there a way for you to?
We have a
actually
good like
gain insight
it's
into
sort of
those
hard.
metrics?
Yeah, no, we can measure. We can definitely measure elements of casual contact. For example, like when someone records a call with Grain, they can get a recap after the call, and that recap can be sent to all the participants. If someone clicks on the link and then uses that to sign up, we measure that. Um, there's a few other touch points we measure.
Oh,
There's
nice.
also like
Okay.
the non-measurable side of it, which is just like, hey, I see Grain in a meeting, and then I'm going to go Google it after. So a lot of it also can come in the forms of direct and branded search, and so it's hard to tease those out.
I did notice that you're a top sales management voice on LinkedIn. Is LinkedIn doing any justice when it comes to lead generation for Grain?
Yeah, I'd say that's something we're working on right now. We're in the early innings of figuring out exactly how we're doing it, but it's something I've been working on for the last month or so, like trying to figure out. And yeah, some good signs there, but definitely not a major channel for us at this moment. Hopefully to become one though.
Okay. Any other channels we're mentioning is no, yes. Well, I feel like it's a given. Any other channels like is search engine optimization doing anything for you? Have you tested paid ads? Anything that is working for this particular market?
Yeah. I think we've been working on definitely SEOs and content. So like when I said earlier, like we're working on things to sort of augment. I wouldn't say that we've like nailed any of them, but we're experimenting with different things, and they're along the lines of the ones you mentioned.
We touched on channels and basically strategies. I think the casual content one and the way that you're tracking it is really ingenious. Uh, Other than that, are there any other main drivers for growth? Basically, can you give us an insight into how Grain has been scaling their business so far? And then, basically, well, if you can elaborate on the drivers of the growth for Gain.
Yeah. So um, yeah, I think like I said, we have a content strategy which involves SEO. That's I think it's definitely driving traffic to us, but something that I think there's opportunity for us to expand. We also do a content strategy on LinkedIn that is early, but working on it. And then,
Hmm.
like I said, the kind of core casual contact, word of mouth. So those are the three. Uh, the last one, the casual contact one, is the one that's working the most effectively, and so still kind of in the early innings of the other two. I think one of
Got
the
it.
interesting thing
Okay.
is, I think like one of
All
the
right.
interesting things that
So you mentioned about. Mhm.
no, sorry, all I was going to say is I think one of the interesting
Go
things
ahead.
is like when you're trying
Sorry.
kind of when you're when you're a company kind of you know I assume a lot of this podcast audience are like early stage startups. When you're kind of getting to 1 million ARR, um,
Hmm.
you don't. I think I don't think you really need to be careful not like try too many channels. I think usually you get one channel to work, and then the rest is sort of like doing things that augment that kind of main channel, but you're not like over investing in building out multiple channels. Once you get past 1 million ARR, I think you need reinforcing channels to help. And so that's kind of like where we are in our journey is like we're well past the 1 million ARR, and we've sort of got to the 1 million through our core channel and our core loops, and have since started to build the SEO content loops. But again, those are still I think those loops take a while to get up and going, and so I think we still have to figure out I think a lot of things in those lanes to kind of get it to work the way we want it to work.
Got it. Got it. Is the quality of the leads that are generated through SEO satisfactory, or
No, that's like
are you
for example like
seeing
one of the
basically
things
some
that
lower
like we
quality
have
leads
a lot
coming
of
from
high
Google
performing
search?
articles, but it's like how do you actually are those the right ones? Are they driving the right traffic? And if they're even driving the right traffic, are we sort of capturing that the right way and engaging with them the right way? I think that's the part of the SEO strategy that I think takes
Yes.
a lot of I'd say not only just like SEO ability, but also alignment with product and alignment with product marketing and other leaders to kind of make sure that like you're getting the full, like the bottom of the funnel attribution to make sure you're driving the right types of leads.
Yes, I agree. I mean, nailing the user intent is pretty much half of the work, but it is a complex question, of course. Okay, so just a second. In terms of challenges, you mentioned a while ago that product features are important to stay ahead of the curve. So, can you give us a bit of more insight in terms of how Grain handles product innovation, how you decide what to build, like what is prioritized? Is it maybe something where we talk with the audience and then we hear back and implement, or what's the process? Can you just kind of take us through that scenario?
Yeah. So the way at Grain we do it is first we have our strategy. So our strategy at a high level basically articulates what we're focused on and and how we think that focus will help us make progress towards achieving our goals. Then behind the strategy, you have and the strategy basically is like the guiding principle or the guiding lens, the guiding policy for all the product work we do. Then behind the strategy, we then have specific, I'd say we have specific initiatives, or some people call them epics, but they're high level things, are like roadmaps, some people call them, but big areas that we know we need to improve on to support the strategy to win. And then with each one of those, then you have specific features. And so the way that we kind of get insight on all three levels is like the strategy is something that I would say is always a work in progress, but on about a quarterly basis, we always take a step back and look and say, hey, you know, are we still pointing in the right direction? Like, are we still making the right moves that we think will help us win? Then on a monthly basis or so, we reevaluate our kind of core initiatives, product initiatives, and say, are these still the priority? Do we still think these will have the biggest leverage towards the strategy? And then on a more frequent basis, sometimes monthly, bi-weekly, even weekly, we're constantly reevaluating the projects or the features that kind of go into that. And the key inputs are, what we're seeing, what our customers are saying, the data we're getting as through our analytics. We're constantly running kind of generative user research where we're not just asking for feedback, but we're actually going out to our customers and asking them deep probing questions to understand their needs, their motivations, their preferences. And then also sales is really big for us. Because we're kind of a sales product for salespeople, we're always dogfooding our product and using it in our own sales process. And that gives us a lot of intuition of like opportunities to add more value.
Yes, I noticed the sales coaching guide on the Grain website. Is that a part of the strategy, or well, given your experience, I feel like you do have a lot to share there. But is it helpful in generating the leads? Is it basically an attempt to establish Grain as the resource for this particular topic, or is this basically just you giving back to the
Yeah, exactly. So
audience? If that makes sense.
that's one of the areas that we want to establish Grain as like an authority on. It's something have a lot of experience in and have been doing a lot of research on over the last several quarters and building as we've been building the features into our product. And so we want to kind of take what we've been learning, share our point of view on it, and hopefully become kind of like a go-to resource for people who want to learn about sales coaching, especially for people who are just building their sales teams, or maybe they have a sales team, they've been a sales manager for a little while, but they've never really thought, okay, how do I actually like build a programmatic coaching motion to help my reps improve?
Okay, amazing. Okay, so back to the innovation. How important is innovation for retaining customers in the landscape like this one, where we know like there's multiple kind of apps that are trying, or products that are trying to do the same thing. So innovation, is that something that is basically an efficient strategy for you guys to keep the customers engaged, keep the momentum going, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Like, we just know for a fact that in the market we're in, a large part of our customer base are sort of early adopters, um, in early, like early majority, early innovators who are usually aware of like what's out there. And so um, we see kind of like we see innovation as kind of like playing a few different roles. One is to neutralize, like if a competitor kind of launches a new feature, we don't want our customers to say, "Oh man, I wish." Like it's okay for a little bit. But we don't want our customers to be like, "Oh, there's this amazing thing over there, and I want to go try that other product." We want them to know, "Hey, Grain's going to do it eventually." And the reason why they believe that is because they see us just constantly innovating. So that's one thing, is like it sort of helps with switching, or like a loyalty. Two is that it helps with growth, because we're a word of mouth product. If you
Hmm.
deliver killer experiences, people are going to go tell their friends about it. And so it's really important for our word of mouth growth. And then three is like, I'm just a big believer that consistent improvements over time give you the best product. And in the long run, I think growth is super important. This is a lot of times in this podcast, you're talking about growth, but in the long run, the best products win, or at least maybe not always the best, but the top three products win. Maybe it's like, but you can't have like, I think it's incredibly rare in today's world for a inferior product to win purely on growth and marketing. Like you have to have one of the top products to, I think, win in the long run. So
Yeah,
that's why innovation, I think, becomes really important. So
I agree. I mean, we're talking about smart shoppers, right? We're talking about people that are actually going to research their options, compare you,
exactly.
websites that are comparing you like G2 directly with the competition. And I feel like at a certain point, the game is going to get to a place where you just have to literally care about the users and produce something of high value, and basically build it and they'll come type of a scenario. Okay, I mean, amazing. So, in terms of, so Grain's been around for how long did you say? I think it's more than 3 years now, or just a second. You mentioned you were working pre-COVID, and you were in the company for the past 2.5 years. So when was Grain launched?
Uh, we launched Grain. Um, like so the thing that's interesting is, just like any startup, there's the launch story is always a little complicated, because we launched like an early version that was quite different than the one that we ultimately went to market with, um, or the one that is basically what is Grain today.
Hmm.
But that very kind of the early V1 of Grain that we launched Learn was like 2018, late 2018 or early 2019, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna go back now to that for a second, because I feel like we uncovered something nice here. So, what was can you take us through that period? Basically, what was the first version of Grain, and how did you decide to go with this version of the market? Like, what was the process behind that decision?
Yeah, I think the first version was a lot more about taking notes on your meetings than it was around kind of creating this recording as like as an asset, like a video recording as like the core asset that you then can mine for insights and information to power your workflows and
Hmm.
learning across teams.
Got it. Okay, so the idea was basically the same, it's just kind of super improved right now. I understand.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly. Yeah,
so
exactly. It's always been about trying
did
to
Grain
make.
raise capital? Yeah.
No, I was going to say, Grain's always been about trying to make
Yes,
our
sir. There was a
meetings.
lag.
Yeah, a little bit of latency. It's always been about trying to make our meetings a little more productive, helping people do better work through these meetings that we're spending all this time on video conferencing. Now the vision and the implementation that has evolved dramatically over the years, as and frankly with LLMs it's even gone way farther than we actually believe. Like it's amazing that you can automatically have notes taken, and the notes are like as good as better as if I was typing them. It's amazing that the AI can automatically score calls to tell if a deal is at risk. It's amazing that it can, you know, evaluate me against rubric and give me automatic feedback. Like we're launching this feature called scorecards, which is basically going to automatically tell coaches and managers like how good reps are doing on calls in a structured way. And so there's just amazing things that we can do now. And I think we're just getting like we're in the early innings. It's pretty exciting.
Okay, amazing. That's super exciting. Okay, so did Grain raise capital, or is this completely a bootstrap kind of operation?
Yeah, we've raised money through a number of different institutional folks.
Okay, um, so why did you raise capital? Was there basically a moment where you just needed to grow, or you kind of tested the product, or can you take us through that period a little bit, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I mean, at the time when we raised, I wasn't the CEO, so I don't know if I can speak to it that well. But at the end of the day, um, we're building a pretty large SaaS product, requires a lot of engineering efforts, and so in a competitive market, and so we kind of felt like it was what was needed to compete.
Got it. Okay, so you were in CEO at the time. You started as the head of operations, correct? And then you kind of gradually
Yeah, I started off
got to the
in
level of
grain. I don't know if
CEO, correct?
title. Yeah, titles in startups are a little bit of a funny thing because everyone wears so many different hats. But I started off, helping with operations and sales. Built a sales team early on. Then I moved over to being the head of product, which was awesome to be able to kind of bring both perspectives, the sales perspective into product. And it's something that, like I mentioned in my career, I'd been a product head of product previously, and then was able to become CEO. So it's been a great journey. I think the CEO at an early stage startup needs to have a point of view on go to market, a point of view on sales. I guess I should say a point of view on marketing, a point of view on sales, a point of view on product, a point of view of success. I think it's really helpful because you can kind of help all those pieces fit together like a nice puzzle and work together. Um, and so I'm fortunate enough that I've had just kind of enough experience in my background, which I'm not going to say I'm like an expert on all those things, but been exposed to them enough where I feel like where I can kind of help keep everything aligned and make sure that we're all rowing in the right direction.
Got it. Okay, I mean, this sounds exciting. You basically had kind of a holistic picture. So you observed the product from the perspective of addressing the certain pain points with your previous experience. Then you built a team. Then you got involved with the product, and eventually you got to the position where we're at right now, which seems really logical to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the hope.
All right. So let's talk for a few minutes about the challenges. So you've been in Grain. Prior to that, you also worked on a couple of other products. Can you share some of the basically critical lessons or challenges that you learned that we could get out there for other startups and SaaS founders to learn from?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I would say uh, the one that I've been thinking a lot about lately is just how important your market is to your success. I think I think a lot of the SaaS founders, they get started because they tinker, or there's an idea, they get excited about an idea, and so they just start building that idea. And you're really fortunate if that idea happens to work well with a really great market. But I think that like one of the key like leverage points in a startup's journey is like actually deciding what market the customer base you plan to serve and the problem you try to serve for them. That's probably
Mhm.
more important than your team. Well, your team can mess it up, but I guess what I'd say is like a team is necessary but not sufficient in my mind. But a market is necessary, and in some cases even sufficient for a great startup. And so I think it's really important to like just be careful not to just start building and going down a path, but actually take your time to evaluate different markets that you can play in and try to find a market that you're really excited about. That's a strong market with obvious buyers, a budget, a big problem to be solved, a burning problem to solve, but also a market that is not going to get just flooded with competition. You want a market that's like in some ways a little less obvious, and that I think if you can find a market where you're the only player in that market for a few years and you can build a really long lead before other people realize it's sexy because you're popping off, that's going to just be, I would say, just greatly increase your odds of success. I think the other thing that I would also, another kind of lesson that really I think is important is just being really thoughtful about what your personal goals are for your startup. a lot of people these days, they want to do a startup because they, it's romanticized in the culture. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Like, I'm so glad I did a startup. It's awesome. But
Yeah.
it is romanticized, and just thinking really clearly about like why are you doing it, and then trying to make decisions that align with your motivations. For example, if you're really just doing it for control because you don't want to have a boss or because you just like doing your own thing, then I would encourage you to try as hard as possible to do it without raising money, because once you raise money, you give up a lot of control and a lot of sort of freedom to make your own decisions. You kind of are playing a very specific game at that
Mm.
point. If your motivation is for financial reward and upside, you might want to be thinking about what business that that might determine kind of the types of businesses you go after. It might determine whether or not you take funding and how much to take. It might determine whether or not to bring on a co-founder and how much equity to get them. And so I think like a lot of people, they just jump 2 feet into the startup thing, and maybe that's just the way to do it sometimes. But uh, like what I would do honestly is I would go find a friend who's done this before and just be like, "Hey, this is why I'm thinking about doing a startup. This is what's important to me. You know, this is why I'm hoping like this is what I'm hoping to get out of it. These are my fundamental motivations." And have them like challenge you on like some of the decisions you plan to make or have made, on whether or not you're actually making them in a coherent way. You want your decisions to align with why you're doing a startup. So that's probably the second biggest lesson that I would say.
Got it. Okay. That's really insightful. Thank you. Well, while we're talking about the challenges, you also have a, I would say, pretty funny experience that relates to me as well. The Whitlock family job. How's that gig working out for you? And then how do you kind of balance that with with grain and all of the work you're doing there?
Yeah, I think the reason why I laugh is because that's a reference to me mentioning that I have kids, and I'm father of three kids,
Yes.
and kids are the most important thing for me. And I love working on grain. I love my startup, but my kids are my number one priority, and that can be tough. The CEO can be demanding. A startup can be really demanding. There's no silver bullet uh, for trying to find the right balance. But what I will say, like one thing that's a principle that I think has served me pretty well, is this idea that all time is not created equally. I think that's true in every aspect of your life, but it's definitely true in parenting.
Hmm.
And so the way I think about it is like there are going to be moments in your kids' lives that are like super important, and there are going to be moments where it probably doesn't matter one way or another. And just trying to be really attuned and being closer to your kids enough to kind of understand the difference between the moments that really matter and the moments that there's probably a little bit more, I'd say, leeway. So, for example, like my daughter, she's got this like dance recital, and there's two dance recitals this week, and so I was just planning to go to one of them on Friday. But I asked her, I said, "Hey, like, does it matter a lot to you that I make it to both?" And she's like, "Well," she's 6 years old, and she's like, "Well, if you can't make it to both, then it's okay. But I'd really, really love you to make it to both." And I was like, "Okay, that's important to her that I'm to both, and so I'm going to go to both." Um, and that's what I was just trying to do, is the things that really matter for my kids show up for them. And then, uh, there's times when they're out playing with friends or when they're at their grandma's house where I can always catch up that work later, where it really doesn't matter to not be there. So that's kind of how I try to balance it.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I feel like, I mean, that's I'm a father myself. I feel like that's the one question that people always get asked, but no one has kind of, as you mentioned, the definitive answer. Okay. All right. So before we wrap up, we do have some quick fire questions in terms of just your recommendations, and then basically, how would you advise other SaaS founders? So let's just go through those real quick. In terms of book recommendations, what would you recommend for any other SaaS founder to read at this phase?
I'd say three books will get you really far. The first one you hear a lot of people recommend, but I'm just going to say it again: The Mom Test. Really, really, really great, simple book for early stage founders. Two would be Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Fantastic book about strategy that I
Hmm.
highly recommend. It's not specifically written for startups, but it's really helpful to think about how to develop a strategy for your business, which I think is critically important. And then the third book I really like is
Hmm.
I really like the Seven Powers. Is a great book. So obviously there's a lot of awesome books. Like a lot of people are going to say like the hard thing about doing hard things, etc. There's some great books out there, but those would be my top three.
Awesome. Okay. Which business leader do you admire the most? Like, is there someone that you follow that you like to, kind of stalk on LinkedIn and everything?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, there's the classic ones that everyone talks about, like Steve Jobs. I mean, obviously he's no longer here, but I really like about some things about him. As far as like the ones that I follow closely today, it was like I like Brian Chesky of Airbnb, really great CEO, runs product in a really great way.
Hmm.
Things I think I like a lot of what he has to say about building culture. I really like Carrie. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, but the CEO of Linear, follow him pretty closely and think they're building an amazing product.
Okay.
And I like some of their points of view on how to approach things. Those are probably the two that I'd say. I mean, Hit Shaw is awesome, and I follow him a lot, and he has just like he's done so many startups and has like a lot of really good things to say. One person that's not a founder that I really think is worth putting on your radar, if is not on your radar, is Shreyas Doshi. He was a product manager at Stripe, but just has really great insights on
Okay.
building products.
Okay. That's super interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So, in terms of SaaS tools, what tools do you use on the daily? Is there anything that is within your kind of technology stack that is not as popular, but you feel like people should know about it?
Um, I don't know. I don't know if this one's like broken out yet. Some of your listeners might have heard it, some might not. But I like Speechify. That's one I've recently adopted. That's been amazing. Been pretty game changing for me. I use it a lot to just read
Okay.
documents to get them fast. I also really like to use this product called Paste, which is just like I mean, if you don't, I'm sure, hopefully most people are using a clipboard manager, but if you're not, use Paste. It's a really, really like amazing clipboard manager that's really, really great. It's searchable. You can bucket stuff into different contents. There's keyboard shortcuts. It's really, really awesome keyboard or clipboard manager. Um, Grain. If you're not using Grain, you should definitely be using it. That honestly though, but Grain has been huge
Yeah.
for my productivity. To be honest, it's been killer.
Awesome. Okay, so what is the best piece of advice you ever received as a CEO of a SaaS company like Rain?
The best piece of advice I've received. I think the best piece of advice I've received has been, uh, as a founder, to try to always be in proactive mode. Try to get it. If you know, like, watch why you're doing things, and just try to constantly monitor: am I being reactive or am I being proactive? Reactive looks like I'm following up to Slack messages and I'm following up on emails, and someone's coming to talk to me, and you're just constantly reacting to the day as it unfolds. Proactive is like, this is what's important. This is what I'm going to spend my time. I'm going to let all those distractions just stay there, and I'm going to do what I said was important. And I think as a founder, it's so easy to get in reactive mode, especially once you start having a team and customers, and everyone's going to be asking for your time. But if everyone's asking for your time, you're not going to be being a great leader. Like, you need to give people your time. Don't get me wrong. Like, it's important to be available for your customers, it's important to be available for your team, but it has to be on your terms. And if not, you're just going to find yourself where you've just wasted large swaths of time. Like, I've been in reactive mode honestly for like an entire quarter and not gotten myself out of it. Not to say I didn't ever do things, but where my primary mode was reactivity, and I've really regretted it. You want to always, like, again, like, there might be days where you're just reactive, but always remember, like, notice if that's your primary mode. If that's your primary mode, get out of it. Get into proactive as your primary mode, and I think you're just gonna do a lot better. You're gonna move your business forward.
Okay, yeah, that's an amazing advice. Okay, so we'll end on that note, but before we do, I do want to ask you for a referral. Basically, do you think there's anyone from the SaaS companies that you would like to see on this podcast? Anyone that caught your attention that you feel like deserves the spot?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I think there's some really there's this guy named Alper Yerder from Flola. He's great. You should talk to him.
Okay. Flolo. Got it.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So so we are about to wrap it up. So thank you so much for your time with us, and of course, we're really impressed by Grain, and we hope you guys achieve your goals. Wish you all the best. If someone does want to get in touch with you, is there basically a way for them to do it on LinkedIn or
Yeah, just
through the Grain website?
connect with me on LinkedIn, Jeff Whitlock at Grain LinkedIn. If you just type in Jeff Whitlock Grain, you'll find me.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeff, and thank you for joining the SaaS Mind podcast. I hope that the questions weren't too hard, and yeah, we'll
No, it was
definitely
great.
keep in
Super happy to
communication.
be here. Thank
Okay.
you. All right. Peace.
To finish off this episode, a little promotion from our end. Neoptima is an award-winning marketing agency for B2B SaaS businesses. We work with companies backed by YC, Sequoia, Carlyle, Lightspeed Ventures, Northzone, and many other top VCs and PE investors. We work with venture-backed, private equity-owned, and bootstrapped SaaS businesses all around the world. Reach out to us and book a call in the description below so we can optimize your growth journey. If you have a fellow founder, if you have a team member, if you are part of a Slack group, Telegram, or WhatsApp group with other founders that could get value from this episode, please share this episode with them. We want to help as many founders as possible to scale their business. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you in the next episode.